Excellent work, Hugh. Really, really nice job. I mean, really close to being ready for the stands. But there are a few conceptual things that I want you to think about at the beginning of the piece, which we'll talk about when we get there. But as you may have noticed with other entries recently, hopefully people have been watching those that I released yesterday. I am starting at E and working my way backwards. That way, the bulk of my, the sort of the freshest take, the most time that I'll be spending on these evaluations will be on areas that people are not quite as familiar with. Because of just the way everything's worked out, right? With the first few entries just being, covering the beginning and then beginning going towards the middle. So I thought it would be kind of nice to just really, start from the end and have some comments to say about that, and then kind of work back to D, because usually the D section is just like really enormous, and then we'll talk about the beginning, where I think that there is a little bit of work still to be done. Now, this is really a lovely chord, and I'll be talking about your harmony more in context with what happened before. But this is very similar to an entry that I looked at yesterday. There is no destination dynamic here at the end. I think you really have got to let us know, because like fortissimo diminuendo to what? Triple P, right? So like basically just give everybody a triple P, and I think that and then you don't really even need this niente mark here at the end, because in the first place, it's going to be difficult enough on your first horn player to soften down extremely on, after playing this really, really loud F sharp, then soften and soften and soften and get softer and softer and softer. It's just sort of borderline of that kind of real pinpoint, delicate control that a horn can have. So, I wouldn't be expecting any miracles like this, but I think it's enough just to give the player a diminuendo mark, and then everybody will just ease off with the normal way that brass and wind players shape their articulation, right? Just let them do that. You don't have to gild the lily with this. All right, so now the next concern I have is right here. So you're saying tuba with double bass and double bass solo with tuba. So this is just a single player pitted against a tuba player. And I feel that like the tuba will be all that you hear here, right? Just with a single solo double bassist. So like what's the solution? Well, you could tell your a tuba player to play pianissimo, and that has some problems as well. Like I would actually take away the tenuto marks and just have the tuba player just play normally articulated notes. Let the double bassist play play the tenuto marks, and I would actually give the double bassist a little bit of a nuance here, a little bit of shape, da 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 da, in the back off, so crescendo and diminuendo. And meanwhile, have your tuba player pianissimo all the way through, no nuance whatsoever, because you're just giving a little bit of color to the double bass line, right? You can't really get a perfect merging here. If you do, step towards that line, the tuba will take over and just stay there, right? All right, and then my next concern is if you're going to have some kind of mixed sound here, and then you're not going to have any mixed sound on the cello. So, that's perfectly fine. It's going to work, but will there be continuity, like of tone weight, going from this heavier, darker sound to like a more chesty sound from your cellist? Okay, and there's absolutely zero need for you to mark up bows here, and then there was another one. I think it was earlier. But yeah, you don't have to tell the players what to do. They know where to put in an up bow, especially before, like a down bow with a tenuto on it. Of course they would go up bow here. So you don't need to tell them. It's really, it's like putting it's like putting training wheels on a on a Harley Davidson, right? They don't. They're the best of the best. They don't need the help, right? Now you might be thinking, well, what if it's for a community orchestra or but it doesn't matter. Those players know. Like only like the most student of the students would not know this, and you wouldn't want them to play this, right? Any string player who is good enough to play this would not need this hint. All right, and this may be one of the scores that I reorganized. That's why there's this big gap here, because of the Osea staff for the solo disappearing. So that's on me. But there is like no other way to format this, if I remember correctly. Okay, yeah. So we've got a few artifacts left over from the piano score, and one of them is this. Do you really want this? Duh. Maybe like. I mean, wouldn't it be kind of a little bit more eloquent to have this articulated all together, flutes and clarinets, and the down bow for the strings, right? Just like really having that touch rather than the slur across, right? Normally in a case like this, right? Okay. Now, one of the concerns here in this E section, in my criteria, is that the upper part will remain a background element, and the melody, which is lower, will remain a foreground element, right? So, it might be good to sort of take away the nuances from the harmony parts, right? And just let the melody parts have the nuances, right? So for your upper strings here, like just get rid of the hairpins, get rid of the espressivo, and have it kind of like more cool, like you want this like but like this is espressivo, right? This part right in here is what needs to be expressive and juicy and stuff. The parts above need to kind of be cool. You could even write like non-vibrato on this, right? And then it would just have that just kind of nice kind of hovering, almost raw color, while your other instruments were, kind of playing, yeah, da, da. And do you, like this is sort of an artifact from the piano part. So do you want a wind tenuto with some really blocky notes? Or do you want this to be like portato, right? You could put a slur over them, there's a bunch of different ways of doing it. But I feel actually portato is the way that has like the most kind of urgency, the most has the most emotional character. And then once again, yeah, for this part in here, espressivo, I would just get rid of that, right, and just have it nice and cool, even non-vibrato, as I said before, on these parts. And then diminuendo, I give this a destination of pianissimo. Why not, right? Even though you're tailing off into nothing. Right, and then here, I would say push, and here's where I sort of reverse everything, right? Da da dum ba da. Do you notice how in your mock-up and in my mind, as I'm looking at this and hearing it internally, there isn't that sense of an implied leap here, right? Da 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 dum is really kind of all you're doing here. Da 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 da. So how do you get that? Is by having everybody match their dynamics. And at this point, at the Doloroso, Barvinsky wants all parts to be equal in significance, right? He's like, before he had an obvious contrast between the lower melody, right, and then the kind of upper harmonization. But at this point, I think he wants everybody to kind of work together, especially with this right in here. And if you're going to put an accent on it, you might as well give everybody the same level of force here, I think. And then this is all lovely right in here. This little string scoring, yeah. So is this Is this intended to be divisi or non-divisi? I think you should mark it. All right. There might be a few other spots in this. I think I noticed where you had not marked it. And and then just in case, in terms of like marking who is who, you have left out a few entrance markings. Like here you're saying first bassoon, but which oboist is this? Little things like that. Like if you really do plan to get this published, you have some serious kind of accreditation and claim of copyright and stuff on the first page. So that sort of speaks to me that you intend to possibly get this published and performed and so on. And if you do, then you might want another pair of eyes. Just have somebody go over it and just look for little bits and pieces like that. Now, a little bit of this feels somewhat too, it's all like down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Like it's just there are no slurs in here, right? So I think that you could go da, da bum, right? Like there's kind of an implied slur here, and then da up there, and then same thing here. Maybe slur in the cello, slur to the B or to the A, and then this could also slur. Right. Now this is really lovely right in here. Solo. Yeah, the mezzo piano is more for the mock-up, isn't it? You can solo piano espressivo here, and you will get as juicy a sound as you want. You do not need to start at a moderated tone. For all I care, you could have a solo starting forte. You know what I mean? Or mezzo forte. But I think mezzo piano is just a little dull. Ba, da, da, da. This is nice sul tasto. And then answering with English horn. And it's kind of nice how the English horn can really cover a lot of space. I would definitely mark this solo as well. And and then a nice handoff to the bassoon. Now you're probably noticing in the mock-up, like, oh man, it just like this B seems to hang in the air, and everybody else sort of feels like they are, like it's just all about the B ending things off, and there really isn't any power in the strings. Well, the answer to that, right? And that is this B is played by the double basses that slur into the G, and the strings come in at piano. Right? And then everybody fades out to whatever, triple P, pianissimo, whatever. You don't need to mark it in a case like this. And if you're gonna give this long duration at a slow tempo to a to timpani, I think you do have to write like SOS period, like just sostenuto, right? Just to kind of let them know that they're just really going to let that hang and everything else. You'd even just put in a like a quarter note with the little LV tie on it as well, right? It just looks weird. Like sometimes there's always a chance that like the conductor will question it. Like they'll say, was this accidentally left in here from the cello part or something, right? Like they might not understand what you exactly mean. So sometimes it's not bad to just like rein it in a little bit. Maybe mark a dotted quarter note or a half note or something like that, and or just put like the LV tie on it and just say sostenuto, just some guide so that the player doesn't know that. Doesn't get the idea that you weren't thinking or something. But I would say most timpanists would look at that and they'd say, yeah, okay, all right. They just really, they want a really long note there. But like how long can the note last if it's a pianissimo? Like a pianissimo stroke on a timpani on the timpani, the kettle drum head, is not going to last very long, right? So this is really idealistic, not very realistic at all. You might as well just put in a quarter note, because it's the theater, it's the hall that gives you the sustain. But aside from all those other quibbles, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I really love the approach right in here. It's really nice to have the bassoon and English horn and piccolo in this kind of stack. Kind of fun. I mean, maybe you might not even need the piccolo, right? Because it sort of distracts from the the fact that that the melody is a lower element, and the winds and upper strings are harmonizing from above, right? And when you cross into their territory, it's just becomes a little confused of where the differentiation between the roles becomes a little bit obscure, right? Okay, so back to D. All right, so look, I've got real mixed feelings about this A sharp here. Was that supposed to be G sharp? Possibly? In your kettles? Yeah. Because it really has this kind of a. I can see the A sharp, kind of giving way to a G sharp or an F sharp, right? The actual note that should be writing throughout this entire section here is F sharp, right? That is the kind of the pedal point, right? And I mean, I'm going to have a lot to say about the way that you change that. So that's the thing that I feel is not quite ready for the stands, is the treatment of the bass part in previous sections. Now here, the fact that you're varying it and changing things around, I actually approve of if the earlier part is simplified. But see, in this context, I feel that if you're gonna change things radically before, then this is just kind of more of the same, right? So it doesn't have that unique quality. So I think that simplifying the earlier thing and then making this leaving this the way it is, but maybe changing this to a G sharp or even an F sharp, I think would make a lot of sense. And then here, I just really don't. I mean, this E here is I understand what you're doing here with the harmony, but this E rolling against these low F sharps, right? And then you're kind of giving the game away of of this motion to an E in the bass, right? So I feel that it's it kind of it kind of weakens the surprise of where we're headed from here, right? Because Barvinsky takes us in a new direction to set up the big climax, and we're kind of giving away a little bit of that. And the other thing too is I don't think you need to go triple F here. I think fortissimo is fine. Maybe you needed to do triple F to get it to work in the mock-up, but seeing as how you're giving destination dynamics to a lot of the instruments here in these parts, even if it ends in a rest, you have to tell us that the mezzo piano is going to end in a forte, right? Because otherwise this person might just go up to mezzo forte, while all of the people sitting next to them are going up to forte. Here saying sempre crescendo, I think poco a poco crescendo is better, right? This is kind of more of a. I mean, I'm not going to say it's something that doesn't happen in orchestral scores, but it's just clearer to say poco a poco crescendo, because sempre crescendo, it's sort of ever crescendoing, right? Might give the person the wrong idea, and they might end up getting too loud too fast. That would be my only concern, right? So so here we see the invisible hairpin. So this has to have a destination dynamic, right? And it'll also help your mock-up as well. And the same thing here, I would want to know that these players were playing forte by the time they got to here, right? And if they're playing forte, then fortissimo is loud enough for your glockenspiel, right? You might be thinking, well, on the next page, I have a forte marking here and so on, but it's that's not enough. You really have to, like, especially with things that have end and rests and so on. We kind of have to know where you're headed so that by the time we get to this big moment here, that everybody else knows how loud they're getting. That would be the way that I would think about it. Or just very carefully work out which parts have markings and which don't, right? Which you may have done, but still, it like, when I'm seeing all of these other players end up on a forte, I kind of, as a score reader, and possibly if I were conducting this, I would kind of want to know where everybody else was at by the time they got to this point too, right? It's just just context. All right. All right, so now let's talk about the cascades. All right, now I'm seeing like you're throwing in D sharp instead of F sharp and so on, and that kind of gives you a little bit of extra leg room, right? You are able to, like, instead of cascading down from an F sharp that doesn't exist even higher, right? But the thing is like here you're playing the D sharp, and the D sharp is part of the melody. That's cool. And then here you play it again, and that's, well, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then here you do it again, and then by the time we get to the fourth one, it just becomes a little too regular. I would change this around a little bit. How about G sharp here to match where the melody is, and then back to D sharp and back to G sharp, and then here you got the C sharp that matches up this melody and so on. So like that, and then here. Why not just like go F sharp, F sharp, F sharp? Anyway, all right. So the cascading is very, very cool. I like the way that you sort of manage it across the flutes and then the clarinet and so on and so forth. And then like when things start to get a little louder, you keep the cascading octaves in the oboe rather than push the flute too low. It's just really, really smart orchestration. Good craft, and I like the way everything connects with the octaves below. It's all really nice, really nicely done. And then and the way that the middle voice is used, it's nice. It's kind of gets to be a bit of a big stack here: bassoons, horns, trombones and so on, and lower strings. But just as long as the players are not playing too much, like are not pushing too much into it, then then it's okay. Then thinking about the melody right in here, Divisi violins, and then we've got the oboe and the English horn kind of stacked. So we've got our triple octave. Trombones below, kind of playing the harmony. It's pretty nicely done, I would say. It all works great. Trombones can play pianissimo so beautifully. Despite their reputation. Yeah. So, like, about my only anxiety about this is that as this lifts higher, we're kind of, the pressure is just really put on the top line to deliver the goods, right? Do the flutes need to go a due here, a two here? Do they really need to? Why can't you just stick with one flute player, and then have flute one take over from right here in doubling the top line? And then that would give that top line some firmness, and the ability to contribute to the stack of first horn and trumpet, right, playing below. And then and see here you're going to A2. See, so like it's really, there's this top line here is quite naked, right? So it just needs a little bit of doubling, even just a single flute, right? You do not need to be A2 here with both of your flutes. They are going to be fine on these cascades. Yeah, but just you really warm up the texture here beautifully. That's really, really nicely done. Then turning to the next part here, There are two problems here that I see in this page. Okay, and the first one is that, like, sort of lies in these flurries. Okay, so I like the flurries, but I think that after a while they get to be a little too regular, right? They kind of, like, by the time we get to the third bar, then the fourth bar, it's sort of, oh yeah, we're kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down, right? If there's some way to vary them, like maybe, have them do different things that, just like some change arounds and some other kinds of things that, like, so that our ear cannot predict what they're going to do next exactly, right? All right, now here you'll never need to say this to your copyist or your conductor. If they know that this is a due here or a two, then they will know that it is continuing on, right? It's your care is meritorious, but it's unnecessary. All right, now here's the second problem that I have. Okay, and that is that if you look at the piano score, there is not a leap here, right? It is G natural to F double sharp, right? So the same pitch, and that is done in the same octave, right? So you're going ba-bum. Here's the problem, is because of the context of the strengthening brass and then the even stronger brass, the leap is getting lost, right? Even though you're leaving some space, you're saying, oh, well, put in a rest here, and then everybody will hear the da-da. Did you notice in the mock-up that you can't quite, it's just like not very clear? I think that Barvinsky's intentions are da-da, not da-da. He wants da-da, da-da. Because like here, it's echo da-da, da-da. Right? So I would just jack everything up an octave. Right? Ba-ba, da-da. And then it's like, then problem sorted, everything's solved, and, everything is going to work fine. So long as there is no crescendo here, this is going to work fine and not seem too much like that it's an overstatement by the time that we just get into solid octaves here. But it's kind of interesting that you have no bassoon in here. And, third and fourth horn are kind of absent, and yeah. So I'll have some more to say about that, but let's just kind of look at this. So, like, let's say that you could vary, have some more variety, and rather just than just up and down arcs. Bassoons and cellos and double basses, they will cut it, right? It's like you have avoided using a contrabassoon, right, where it could have added a little bit of needed weight. But like you're kind of compensating with the timpani, and there are some strategies that you're putting in there to kind of make it feel like there is more support for the motion of those bass octaves. Okay. Yeah. So here we've got A2 octaves, or so A2 oboes, English horn, octave below, and they're being doubled by trumpets. The trumpets will pretty much shout over them, but if you just want a moderated tone, right? If we just jump back up here. Like, we've gotten to forte here, we've gotten to forte there. Now to come back down, the trumpet is going to tend to scream up there. I would mark I would go to fortissimo here already, right? And then that would give you a bit of a balance with your forte brass. Yeah, so this in the mock-up, this has just a very kind of edgy sort of a sound, and that's fine. As part of it is because the trumpet is just so high, right? It just has kind of a blaring quality, right? And then you kind of trade off to the two strings and winds put together. So yeah. So that's all good. I mean, it's a good transition, but it's all the more reason to go ba bum, not da da. Because you already had such strength up there on that high B, right? That I think that the leap also just sort of gets swallowed into, like, if there was nothing else happening before, then the leap would be fine, but the wash of sound coming from the hall is going to be enough to kind of take away that emphasis. And you could put an accent on it too if you just really want to hang on to that pseudo octave leap. I say pseudo octave because a leap from a G to a F double sharp is theoretically not the leap of an octave, even though it sounds like one. All right. Yeah, but like other than that, this is nicely done. So now, like, moving on to the juicy part. So we got this massive triple octave here of viola, second and first violins, and then we have an additional octave on top of that of the piccolo, right? So quadruple octave, it's going to scorch, right? Yeah, and so, like, just little bits and pieces, like when you go to an interval, then you have to go back to do a, when you get to the single line, right? And then the same thing here. So you're going to have to mark all of those. Right? It's not like string parts where you can say divisi and then unison and then just simile when it happens again and then forget about it, and then they'll just know. Which would be the standard way. Like if it had no marking on it, that's what they would do anyways. But you're just kind of giving them permission, right? Okay. So here's the problem. Okay. I'm not quite so sure why you are going down to a mezzo forte here. You've got fortissimo above, huge octave melody. You've got fortissimo marcato brass right in here. And then you have this sort of thing where you're going fortissimo mezzo forte, and so on and so on and so forth. Yes, here you're saying simile. I see what's going on. Okay, you can't do that. Every dynamic has got to be marked. Every slur, every dynamic. It's always like, because, like, see how you fooled me? Like I was slightly carelessly not paying attention. So what you would do in a situation like this, like once you would set up the fortissimo to mezzo forte thing, is you would continue to put, you might be able to say simile in terms of like the markings of mezzo forte and fortissimo, but you would still have to continue to put the hairpins in, okay? But I almost wonder, like, just how necessary it is to kind of go down to mezzo forte. I think that you could just have a row of hair, like you just state the fortissimo and then have like the hairpin, and then just, you continue to have accents and then hairpins afterwards and so on. That is actually implied in the accent itself, isn't it? So maybe it's a little overdoing it. I don't know. Yeah, I see how you're managing it in the mock-up. Yeah, I think that there are ways of simplifying this in terms of its notation. All right, that is not really the part that troubles me the most. Is I feel that there is a kind of a lack of oomph, like you might say, well, lack of oomph, Thomas. I've got all these marcato brass, and and I've got this these massive octaves, and I've got the in both the bass and the melody. What could be lacking in oomph? Well, I think that, like, the blank staves are telling you what is missing here, right? I think that there needs to be more bassoon in here, whether it would be to double the trombones or to provide something beneath them, or to double what's going on the bass trombone, or to develop this what's going on here with the trombones a bit. And like the horns, like these trumpets going yet da 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 da, they're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to match this, right, in terms of their ability to penetrate. So it would be better for you to be doubling these parts, right? So just basically copy paste this onto this, right? And then you would get a balance between, you would get an equal amount of force, right, going back and forth. Now, why should we, like there are things that like obviously leave uncomfortable spaces, right? Like when we completely obey what Barvinsky says just because of the way that the hands are organized, so that he can play essentially three major parts with only two hands, right? So he's got little rests and stuff in his middle staff of the Barvinsky piano score. But like there's no reason why we have to let them be gaps, right? Can't we just fill some of them in? Right? Like these gaps in particular just feel somewhat unnecessary. Right? So and if we're going to get you could continue on with your triplets and have them play against ya da da da. As it's going ya da da da, it could be going da 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 da. You know what I mean? Like this could continue. Like you could have a continuity that where the only gap is on the downbeat, right? And that everything else fills in. So say Ocio Divisi, right? Yeah. I would sort of argue against this. I think it's kind of overdoing it because, you've already got that line covered with other instruments, and the most amount of force needs to be on the top line with your firsts, right? You don't want to break them up and have half of your firsts playing this, with the only thing that is doubling them being the piccolo. It just becomes all about the piccolo and not really about the first violins so much. All right, so continuing on. Boy, I'm really enjoying this. Okay, so yeah, and then now you're going to tremolo. Yeah, you were at tremolo before. Sorry for seeing it, noticing it, and forgetting it, and then noticing it again and then acting like I hadn't noticed it. That's the problem when you are sort of looking at like 100 different details at once and trying to figure out what to comment on. Yeah. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, and this is nice, the telescoping of the piccolo part. That is very, very cool. I mean, I can see how like you kind of want to manage that and add more support below, but it's completely not necessary. That this is necessary. This is really what the firsts have got to do. They can't be dividing themselves up. Yeah, so if you've got this pitch in your second flute, you don't need to. Yeah, I mean, you're okay. You don't need this Ossia. Okay, and then just continuing on what I said, you're just sort of filling in and then here if you're gonna have, yeah, I mean just. Yeah, I can see what you're doing. First horn and then, like, you want to supply the concert G sharp down here. You should do that with two horns. Okay, I would do that with first and third, your most powerful players. Yeah, and don't leave gaps like this. Just leave a gap at the beginning. Just fill in all those gaps. Yeah, and then like figure out something for your bassoon to do, whether it's in support of the bass trombone or maybe filling in even below the trombones, adding more arcing or something like that. And then I think that this will really come together. Yeah, and this is really nice. Yeah, bum ba ba yeah ga 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 ga. Yeah, I think that you should you should leave off with your whole scheme of diminuendo to mezzo forte in this. I think you should keep it solid. Keep it fortissimo. Okay? And I like the big tam-tam whoosh on the next part. That next thing is all really well done. It's great. And so we're finally getting back to the beginning of the piece. All right. One little thing you may have left out, Hugh, and that is the little suspended pitch here. It's not really a suspension, but like the little pitch of sounding G that continues to hold, right? And then tying from the sounding C forwards, right? So essentially, you left out the first bassoon part, right? It was really easy. Just drop in bassoon, or that's just thinking about it. Maybe English horn could play that, just for maybe a slightly more copacetic tone with the flutes and the clarinets. I don't know, but like, yeah, and then the bassoons could make a more pure entrance right in here. I really dig what you're doing in here with the background triple P pushing towards this and then dying out again. Yeah, I think that's kind of nice. Just like really subtle background color. And then going towards this forte right in here. Yeah, just very, very nicely balanced. For people whom I have been continuously scolding about slurring over repeated notes, notice that Hugh has decided to not do that anywhere, right? And just in general, these dotted rhythms in here are also unslurred and so on. Yeah. So, but the only gripe I would have here, Hugh, is like, why does everything need to slur across the downbeat, right? Do we really want da ta 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 ta? I think if you're going to go ta ta, you can go ta 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 ta. Or what about ta 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 ta? Bum 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 bum. Right? I'll just maybe rethink some of that slurring across the downbeat stuff. Because, after a while, it's just like da, 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 like everywhere, over and over, right? So just maybe you don't quite need that. Now, this little artifact from the piano score doesn't need to be here, right? Shouldn't this be just a dotted whole note tie? Because, like, if you started the diminuendo here, then I could see the sense in it, right? You're just saying, like, really, I just do not want you to start diminuendoing or do any kind of change to this bar, to this held note until the middle of the bar. But there isn't that, right? So, shouldn't all these pitches just be... sorry, hesitancy to... Right? Shouldn't it just all be like this? Right? Just simpler on the eye. You can do the same thing here. I won't correct all your stuff for you, but like you get the idea, right? So here was the other up bow. You don't need this. Nobody needs that. Everybody knows. Nobody is going to go down bow on just before a held note on the downbeat, right? It's really unnecessary. Okay, yeah, and then sul ponticello, just really having that kind of edgy sound, and then normal here. This is one of those places where you might see somebody say like put an arrow, like they start from here and they just like have an arrow pointing forward to norm, right? So they, in other words, like just change the tremolo slightly towards a more normal position and then you just go to normal. But I don't think you need to do that in here. Yeah, and then if you're gonna go da 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 da, right? Then why can't we have ta 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 ta, right? Anyway, so but looking at the mechanics of it, this is really lovely. Clarinets and flutes stacked, nice and simple. Same thing again. I think that you can get you get a lot of expression out of that, clarity and so on. And then right in here, just holding, like you have to throw in that note, those two notes that hold the G and then the C, right? Add that in the bassoons, and then yeah, yeah, and then ba ya da da da. This is all nicely scored, clarinets and so on. Could there have been like a any kind of a role for English horn in here? Is what I'm wondering. What if it were English horn playing this instead of the first clarinet? Then you would get like a timbre that has qualities of flute in it. Like, isn't that the weirdest thing? In it's to some respects octave doubling below flute can somehow feel more flute-like on an English horn than an oboe does, right? So yeah. So anyway, but other than that, I've got no issues with this page. So here's where like, okay, you are interpreting the left hand pattern in your cellos and your bassoons, and that left hand pattern is set up to with all the D octaves and everything else, it is absolutely set up for the concept of a D pedal tone, right? And then here you're working against that pedal tone with, kind of moving around the double basses and so on pitches like that. The one that I feel is just the most difficult is the F sharp, because I feel that it's leading too deliberately to the E. All right, it's just like saying, and by the way, here's E. Right? I just really feel like it is just too. I suddenly flashed. I flashed on Enter the Dragon. It is like a finger pointing to the moon. Don't focus on the finger, he says as he slaps his student, or you will lose all of its heavenly glory, right? So maybe this is a finger pointing too much to the E, right? Maybe not focusing on the finger so much. Yeah, so I'm just like the thing about it is, Hugh, like I just really honestly feel like there's like people are experimenting with reharmonization and so on and so forth, and it's all good. Sometimes some is better than others. This is as reharmonization goes, it's not too bad. But like here, you're giving away the eventual move to E minor, right? And we're also losing, like the more that happens, the more we lose the quality of impressionism, right? So you're starting off in a beautifully impressionistic way on the previous screen, and then here we are, just like with this just wonderful colors that you've got in here, the clarinet on top, and then doubling with a horn. I mean, just what a wonderful idea. And then the other horns like playing harmony, and then we've got the strings and the violas doubling, and it all works great. I might have you drop the dynamic of the horns down 1 degree just to get an absolute perfect blend here. Wonderful misty quality. What are the basses doing? They're not playing that D, right? So, I mean, just think about it, all right? Just think about it. All right, and this is an artifact from the piano score. You don't need this. Da. Right? You're going up, down, up, down. These instruments should match that. Or you should just put a slur over the whole thing. Okay. Yeah, and then ya ba 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 da da. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, here you go to like the measured tremolo and so on. It's just really wonderful. It's great stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and then like the tiptoeing timpani and so on, and the roll on the E. See, like I love the roll on the E, and this low bass note in the tuba is really very cool, but I just don't know if I like that F sharp. The reharmonization is great, but the orchestration above it is beautifully misty and impressionistic, and maybe it doesn't need for you to take away the sense of the pedal tone on the D, and for you to like change the first note of all of these patterns. Okay, just consider it, because I know that you are thinking of having this performed. I mean, That's what tells me you're thinking of having this performed, right? You wouldn't go to this trouble if not. And by golly, I think it should be performed if I could just get to the right page here. So here, I feel that like you have something really clever going on. Um, I love this whole idea of like just contrasting two more or less identical chords. Uh, what are the colors? Piano versus forte, right? I mean, it's such a great idea. Okay, um, well, we got some problems though. Okay, one is that like here you've scored a fortissimo, or excuse me, fortissimo, a forte high C. Pretty much the highest average note you would want to give to a concert trumpet player. Some players play a D, like there's some Schoenberg high Ds and so on. But like, I would say C is pretty much the limit to ask unless you've consulted with a player. All right. And that note requires some force. And same thing with this sort of G, right? As we're kind of getting into like kind of mezzo forte range, like is at the softest really. And here you're asking them to play piano subito, but like some horn players can still get a nice piano from that high G, high written G. It's not a big deal for them, but high C, piano subito, diminuendo, I'm just not buying it. Okay. Now, seeing as how that C is already kind of covered by the flute here, right? Maybe you could just leave that out. Maybe rearrange the harmony in here. Maybe have your oboe double the flute. Have your trumpet play this A. Maybe even that is a little too strong. So like you have to work this out because that isn't quite working. Everything else about this is actually pretty good, I would say. Yeah, really beautiful sound. I don't see any reason to leave a rest right in here. Right? Like what is the instrument that is covering this note right in here? It is the second flute. So if the second flute is going to a D, which is harmonizing with the first flute on the F sharp, then this should be a D as well, right? Maybe this just accidentally got erased, right? Right. So yeah, it just makes a whole lot more sense rather than leaving a gap. All right. All right. Now, this is nicely done right in here, like just like the pianissimo, right? Tremolo, and then we've got say one or two desk play viola cues. Okay, so yeah, so it really seems to me that you are kind of preparing this maybe for like a community orchestra or possibly a student orchestra level, where they might not have enough violas. Okay, so that's all cool. You've also have a second clarinetist who isn't doing anything, who could cover some of those pitches to help out. But then that would change the timbral quality. Okay, all fair. And of course, you could just go straight from there to like you could have this A being played, being covered by your first violin, and just have your second violinist come in on this. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways of doing this rather than stretching it across. If you're going to be doubling anyways, right here with your second violins, you can have the second violin start here, right? Anyway, and then just like not worry about the violas. But one way or another, it's a cool idea. I have to say, given my druthers, what I would probably do is leave the violas out, especially if I had any kind of notion that this was going to be performed by like a student orchestra or a community orchestra. I would leave the violas out. Then I would have your seconds play this A fifth here, and just tremolo all the way through. So just like a divisi A fifth, basically essentially doing the same thing as the flutes here. Then I would have my first violins come in doubling, just sort of dovetailing off of the end of the cello part. Okay, and then playing this, and then you have the most confident most expressive players, and you don't have to chop and change so much with the way that everything is going in here. Now, did you notice something in your mock-up at how weak this sounded? Right? And it is going to sound that weak. Like say, like here you want to have this contrast. Like you have the beautiful piano, then you want everything to be sort of hushed and then even softer, right? But the problem is if you have this radiance from above here, even diminuendo, this line is just going to get lost underneath that radiance, right? So you would be better off just having this like maybe triple P and no diminuendo, right? And just having it just really even softer and then having this line rise softly. Or look, you could just do this. You could just start off piano, continue on piano, and then end up, instead of crescendo to mezzo forte, crescendo to mezzo piano, right? And then starting this off at pianissimo, right? I just feel it's just really underpowered, right? And then this is great. This is all, I love the simplicity of this scoring, but why did you put a C in there? You naughty person. Like you're telling us where you're going. Don't tell us where we're going, right? The beauty of this wandering line is that it has no guidance, right? It just is going somewhere. We're not really sure where. We're pretty sure that it's going to head kind of back to the home key or something. But I mean, what is going on here, Vasil? Right? What are you planning? Better to not tell us. Don't give us any kind of backstop or footrest or don't give us any help. Don't give the listener any help that they don't deserve. They don't deserve this help. Okay? You want to leave them hanging. Okay. And like right in here, don't give this to the second, give it to the first. I mean, I know you kind of want to like, oh, well, when is the first going to breathe? Don't worry about that. And a decent first flute player could be playing this whole page, right? And they'll sneak a breath in and you would never even know where it was. They'll probably sneak in a breath right here. Just leave it to the first, especially if you're going to be working with a community orchestra or student orchestra, right? You want your absolute best player to be playing this. Unless, you know the second. That's different. But, like, yeah, that's the first's job, is to play that. It would be the second's job to play harmony with the first, if that was part of it. All right, so now for our last screen here. Just looking at C, it's funny, we were ending in the middle. I kind of like that. I like just sort of shaking things up. Yeah, so what I really miss is the cascading. I just really miss the cascading here. That was such a unique, cool effect. Anyway, you could put it back in. I think it would thrill your audience, right? You say that this was going to be an audience of community players. Just think how much enjoyment that they would get out of it, even if you were just doing it on say like vibraphone or some other kind of thing, just something connecting that waterfalls, or is it rain dripping from above, or I mean what is, I don't know what Barvinsky is trying to express there, right? So I miss that, and I also miss the G's, right? I feel like you're guiding us too much. You're kind of telling us where you're sort of resolving, right? And there is no resolution. We are floating in midair and looking at a waterfall or something, or So I feel it's some elements like the changes here are taking some of the drama away, and especially this E right in here. Going to the B. I just feel that this is taking us places where Barvinsky, it just kind of goes against the whole vibe of what Barvinsky is doing. Like on the next screen, we talked about this, like you're changing around the bass line. Like with so many changes leading up to here, this just really becomes too much, I feel. But were you to really, get back into Barvinsky's soul with him, just him really kind of suspending us and just kind of letting that suspense like not allow us to put our feet on the ground, right? Like we're doing here, right? We don't need to put our feet on the ground then I think that you would get a lot more life and color into this, and maybe just bring in some other instrument to you've got flutes here doing nothing, right? Something to bring in the cascading effect. I mean, it's a lovely, like, what you've got here is a really, it's a very cool variation on what it is. And of course, like, I want people to experiment and everything else. But I'm just thinking, in your case, where you really does seem like you are preparing this for a performance. Think about the drama inherent in the C section. The C section. All right, but okay. But let's look at the scoring as it is. Bassoons at octaves with violins. We've got a very delicate melody here with piccolo above, and then stacking with clarinet in the middle and English horn on the bottom. That's a very interesting color. Okay, and then little bouche on the tam-tam. I would make it piano, not mezzo piano. If your strings are playing pianissimo, the piano is the loudest that the tam-tam will ever get, or else you would just not hear the strings if of this bar. You might as well just not even have them play, or have them play just very, just like chords, right? Like, the motion is going to get lost in the bouche. And, it's not going to help out your mid-range winds either. Just make this piano. Yeah. Yeah, and then flute and oboe come in to take over. Now you've got flute on the top voice, oboe in the middle voice, clarinet. And just think, if this is just the first player here and the first player there, well, you still have people around who could be cascading, right? Along with glockenspiel and, look, you got a glockenspiel here. Maybe vibraphone, maybe harp, maybe who knows what. Maybe you're trying to stay away from harp. Yeah, and then da 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 dum, and this is cool. Like, going to the octaves here in the strings, you got doubling from your oboes, ba 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 da 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 da. Yeah, and then just like nice warm horns and trumpet. That's nice. He's like, here you're not pushing things too high, too hard, and actually the overtones do all the work in a first trumpet part, right? Pushing them too high, like, we flip back here. There's just the overtones could be doing all the work here. You wouldn't even need to go very high at all with your trumpets. Just bring everybody down a little bit, because you've got all this space, right? Your bass trombones and tuba are really hanging off the bottom of their staves, right? So you've got more space in here. Having the horns kind of dive down more into the trombone part, and the trumpets, they might not even have to play above C in the staff in order to get this beautiful radiant quality, right? But rather, as opposed to, like, this is more of like a massive tutti kind of a note, or scoring the way that it is. I mean, it's a beautiful effect, but it's a bit of a strain trying to play it really, duplicate it softly. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on your orchestration here, and of course I could go on forever with things like this. It's such a cool score. Like, like, we're getting into the Dotted Brev scores. We're seeing more heavy hitters like you and Anna, and and it's like it really, like, the focus and the intensity and the the possibilities for performance and so on are just kind of just jolting. And it's not that we didn't get a few scores like that in the website evaluations. There were some amazing scores there too, and like a lot of scores that are just going up to D and C and so on and so forth, B, are also pretty amazing as well. But, like, the entire score all the way through just really kind of takes it to a real serious level. So I just really strongly appreciate the amount of work you put into this, Hugh, and also your presence in the community. You seem to be getting as much as I can give out of, as much as I would expect or would want my my community to get out of the Orchestration Online. All of the resources and the conversations and the back and forth and the support that you're showing to other people as they release their videos. And I would say a lot of viewers out there owe you some commentary on your score. So viewers out there, if Hugh has given you some useful feedback, it's time to return the favor. And even if he hasn't yet, then I would say there are probably a lot of things that you would want to add to what I would say, whether in contradiction or in agreement or covering things that I didn't cover, or even just a compliment, because this is a really great score. So I think Hugh deserves a real pat on the back here. And just the huge amount of enjoyment that I got out of sitting down this morning and doing this. I really appreciate that. So thanks so much for supporting and for being so much of a part of everything and helping us help musicians who are really under the gun and whose lives are kind of coming apart through no fault of their own. And thanks everybody out there for watching and commenting and really making this, one of the most amazing orchestration challenges ever, even though the timing of a lot of the processes in this one really got away from me because of circumstances beyond my control. So I may have to reevaluate how I do everything. So I have some ideas about how to do that, which will make the process a little less spontaneous and kind of engaging for me, but will make sure that you get what you need on time a little bit better. Okay? So I'm thinking about those things, and you'll hear more about it when I release the details of next year's challenge. All right, well, thank you so much. Thanks again to Hugh, and I will see everybody later today with another release of one of these evaluations of another one of these amazing scores.